My name is Marisa.
Oh, I'm Josh.
Josh is working on his Spanish. I'm Reno Fagas.
And Roger. So we'll be doing an example debate round today on the bioengineering case. And just as a reminder, this is the only case that students in middle school or high school novice and JV can use for the second half of the season. Starting in January 2023, you cannot use the cybersecurity case. You must use the bioengineering case. All right. What we're going to be doing today is using the middle school novice times of 3-minute constructive, 2-minute cross-examinations, and 3-minute rebuttals. And we're going to be using the high school novice packet, which is also the exact same as the middle school junior varsity packet. So if you're trying to figure out where we're reading from, you can read along. It's the one with the green cover. All right. Myself and Rainer will be the affirmative side in this debate. So our main arguments are going to be supporting the plan, which is that the label law in the United States should be repealed for bioengineered foods. Bioengineered foods, also known as GMOs, should not be required to be labeled. Our main arguments for the affirmative are going to be about promoting bioengineered foods because we think that they're helpful at addressing the hunger crisis in the United States, where there are plenty of people who do not necessarily know where their next meal is going to come from. And the cost of food continues to go up and up. So bioengineered foods can lower that cost. It can also make that food last longer. It can also make that food safer to eat because it's not being treated with pesticides to kill bugs. And it can also even make that food more nutritious by adding ingredients to the food that it wouldn't normally have. So all these things would go a long way towards addressing hunger. We think that labels are getting in the way of bioengineered foods being used and consumed widely. So we propose that getting rid of labels will make people less afraid to buy bioengineered foods and make farmers less afraid to grow them. And that will expand the use of bioengineered foods and hopefully help solve the hunger crisis.
And Josh and I are on the negative.
Yes.
Josh will be the 1N and I will be the 2N. And we're really focusing on how the affirmatives plan does not solve in the way that it wants to and does not address the root causes of food inequity or environmental concerns as it relates to food. So we're focusing on those two things particularly. You'll notice in your packet there are also cards in the negative saying that bioengineered food is not to be trusted, or we don't know it as much yet about what its harms are, or there are ways, that bioengineered food should not be promoted. And we're not thinking necessarily to focus on those in attacking bioengineered foods, but more saying that their plan on the affirmative side does not solve in the way it says it purports to. And talking about the importance of labels as a way to deliver information to consumers. So if there's something that should be maintained, and in fact, maybe even more information should be given. The other thing we want to note to you, just in case for those who are newer to debate, starting in the second half of the season, you do have a packet if you're in JV, in middle school or high school novice. It will be this color as your cover sheet. But you will notice that there'll be a glossary of terms, background information, and then on page 2 of your packet, there'll be summaries that give an overview of like what you just gave for both the affirmative and the negative, and then a glossary of terms. And then you get into the affirmative evidence cards, as we call them, followed by the negative evidence cards. And you will notice that all of us debating will read what we call the tagline, which is the claim at the top, giving a summary of what the card will be saying or the evidence will be saying. We will read the source and the year, the author and the year of this evidence. And then we will read what is underlined and bolded in the evidence, which again, if you're a novice or middle school JV, it will basically be the entire card will be bolded and underlined. That's the actual excerpt or quotes directly from that article or text.
All right, so we're going to jump into the debate here. My name is Roger Nix. I am a staff member of the Boston Debate League, and you would say your school and what side you're debating on. So I'm debating on the affirmative side here. And I'll be doing the 1AC. So I'm going to be reading from the packet pages 4 through 9 that are labeled 1AC at the top. And because they are slightly longer pages and I only have 3 minutes, I'm going to read just part of each page and then explain exactly what parts I'm reading and why as I go so that I can get through all 6 pages. Another approach is to reduce the number of pages that you're reading and read them in their entirety. Either way is acceptable.
Yeah. And debater, just a note, we of course are on Zoom, so we're sitting down, but when you're in your tournament, we encourage you to be standing when it is your turn to speak and really taking ownership of the space.
And so as I give my speech, my partner, Rainer, is going to be flowing what I write so that he knows for his speech, which he'll give after the negative, that arguments that I made so that he can extend those arguments and make sure that we don't drop them going through the debate round. So it's important that partners work together in that way and keep track of each other's arguments to make sure they make it through the debate round. 1AC, inherency, what's happening now? All BE food must have a label saying it is bioengineered. This is Hernandez 22. This is also page 4. The new term for foods created with a boost from science is bioengineered. As of January 1st, food manufacturers, importers, and retailers in the US must comply with a new national labeling standard for food that's been genetically modified in a way that isn't possible through natural growth. Consumers will begin to see labels on some foods that say bioengineered or derived from bioengineering as the new federal standard takes hold. Now I'm going to cut the card at hold and move on to the next page because that explains what the label law is currently. 1AC inherency, what's happening now continued. BE labels make buyers less likely to buy bioengineered foods. This is Stone 22, page 5. Each labeling regime greatly affects consumers' demand for GM foods. Labels such as non-GMO and contains GMO serve as negative signals for GM foods and tend to shrink their market share. The market share shrinkage effect is stronger under the mandatory policy. I cut the card at policy. What this card says is that the labels themselves are a negative signal that make people not want to buy bioengineered food. Next page, 1AC harm, why it's a problem, US hunger. This is page 6, Coleman Jensen et al. 21. Millions of Americans can't afford to buy enough food. Black and Latin households are more highly impacted. Over 33.8 million Americans lived in households that struggled against food insecurity or lack of access to an affordable, nutritious diet. 1 in 26 households in the United States experience very low food security, very low food security, a more severe form of food insecurity, where households report regularly skipping meals or reducing intake because they could not afford food. Race and ethnicity, Black and Latinx households are disproportionately impacted by food insecurity, with food insecurity rates in 2021 triple and double the rate of white households, respectively. So again, this is saying what the problem is and who it's a major problem for, and that it's disproportionately a problem. 1AC harms, why it's a problem diet. I'm going to skip this card and move on to my plan. 1AC plan. The United States should encourage people to eat bioengineered food, also known as genetically modified foods, by repealing the National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Standard, NBFDS, which requires a label for bioengineered foods. This is at the top of page 8. Solvency. How the plan solves the problem. Labels. Also on page 8. Removing mandatory labels will make people less afraid to buy bioengineered foods. This will increase food choice, decrease food cost, and improve nutrition. Scientific American 13. Many people argue for GMO labels in the name of increased consumer choice. On the contrary, such labels have limited people's options. In 1997, a time of growing opposition to GMOs in Europe, the EU began to require them. And that's my time, so I'm just going to finish this paragraph here. By 1999, to avoid labels that might drive customers away, most major European retailers had removed genetically modified ingredients. Today is virtually impossible to find GMOs in European supermarkets. And then the last line of this card that I would have read was, more such products are in the works, but only with public support and funding will they make their way to people's plates. And that's the end of my speech. I'm now open for cross-examination.
Okay, and because I am the 2N, I'm going to be asking questions of Roger, the 1A, who just gave his argument, because my partner Josh is getting ready to give his 1N speech in just a moment. Your plan is placing a lot of stock into the removing of labels as something that will really address a wide variety of nutrition and food access problems. First of all, in the very card that you read on page 5, which is Stone 22, that card says not only does GMO labels give negative signals to consumers, but even if it says non-GMO, it also gives negative signals. So given that, how can you say that removing labels is going to increase use of bioengineered foods when, regardless of what the label is, it can have a negative signal to consumers?
Sure, I would say that both of those things are negative signals to consumers, and by removing both of those labels, it will make people less afraid of GMOs.
So how, in your opinion, is it better to give people more information or less information as they're making their own decisions about the food that they buy and, their own economic and health decisions?
Yeah, so I would compare this to like an iPhone user agreement, right? Nobody reads those things. There's way too much information on a label right now for people to really know what's in their food that could be harmful. We want labels to alert people about things like added sugars that have nothing to do with bioengineering that are more harmful for them. We want things that are not harmful, like the fact that it's bioengineered, to be removed from the label so people know about the harmful things that are in their food.
And so I guess it's unclear to me when you talk about addressing things like hunger, which was the main harm that you read was hunger. Why is it that you think that bioengineered foods are the top priority to focus on above, for example, different farming techniques and other addressing, say, food deserts that are across the country that many experts view as really the root cause for lack of access to food and food inequity?
Yeah, so two-part answer here. The first is that our topic this year is about biotech. So this is a biotech solution to hunger. It is not necessarily the only thing that could address hunger, but it is a way that we could help solve the hunger problem. And the main reason why that would be true is because it can significantly reduce the cost of food by making it both cost less and last longer.
So debaters, this is where the 1NC, myself, would take a little bit of prep time to coagulate all the information that has happened so far. What I'm looking to do is to see what has happened in cross-ex that I can bring into speeches. So questions that Marisa asked that I felt were very pertinent to what we're going to say. Even answers that Roger gave, like if Roger gave an answer that was not so strong, I'm also looking for those types of pieces of information to bring into my speech so that I can make a decent 1NC. So I kind of cheated. Sorry, I kind of cheated. So I knew what they were gonna say. So I floated beforehand.
This is not cheating. It's a good technique.
Yeah, I floated beforehand. So as I knew what was going to be said, I floated beforehand, and I even flowed my responses as well, so that I can't write and speak at the same time, unfortunately, and neither can you. So I would recommend if you're going to speak, maybe try and float out if you can. Hi, my name is Josh Nixon. I am Boston Debate League staff, and I'll be representing the negative side of this case. I have 3 points that I would like to make. The first one addressing the inherency, which they're stating that bioengineered, they need labels now. And I have a response to that. I'm going to go into the harms claim. So they claim that by removing bioengineered labels, that it will decrease hunger in the US. I have an answer for that. And then I'll get into solvency as well. On the first point, they say that bioengineered needs labels now. And my contention is that's true in a sense. Bioengineering laws are confusing and are limiting now. So they do currently exist, but when people look at them, they don't quite know what they're looking at. So that adds to the negative connotation of the labels in a sense. But we argue that we need less information on those labels and to be more specific about what is in the actual food and the techniques used to modify it, as opposed to getting rid of the labels altogether. Their harm, which is an important harm for sure, which is US hunger / world hunger. And though we agree as negative that that is a significant harm that should be addressed in general, we feel that the affirmative doesn't go about it the right way, because there are many alternative causes for hunger outside of whether someone's going to eat food that they deem to be bad for them through labeling and engineers. And one of those issues currently is food deserts. There are lots of places in the United States where people don't have access to food. And food deserts are a big reason why low-income families lack access to healthy foods from currently 18. And it says that food deserts are communities, usually low-income areas, lacking grocery stores, farmer markets, and healthy food providers. Cut the card there. And the reason why this is important is because it doesn't matter how many labels we remove from genetically modified foods if people are going to be able to access the foods anyways. The last part I mentioned was the solvency and how they say a reduction in the labels will lead to people being more able to buy foods. And we have what's called a solvency turn. So we're taking what they're saying and we're using it for us. And what it says is labels make people less concerned about bioengineered foods, which means we need more and better labels. So as I was alluding to in our no heresy card, in our no heresy argument, it's not that we don't need labels, it's that the labels need to be refined, and the process for making the labels and the process for getting the information out to consumers needs to be more streamlined so they understand what they are consuming. And the card is from Lamb 20. You might expect a company that creates GMO-based products would want the issue of the labeling to disappear. We don't. In fact, we support mandatory labeling of all GMO products.
Now we'll go into the cross-X. Even though I just gave a speech prior to this, the person who asks questions in cross-X is the person who is not giving the next speech. So I will ask questions of Josh so that Rainer can continue to prepare for his speech, which will be coming up right after this. So we'll put 2 minutes on the clock. Josh, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. So you agree that labels are confusing for bioengineered foods currently?
Currently, yes.
Okay. Do you believe that they could be significantly improved without becoming very lengthy like a iPhone user agreement?
That's an interesting question. Do I believe yes? Do I believe that there's currently a way for it to happen? Questionable.
Okay. If you saw bioengineered food, this food is derived from bioengineering on a package, and you didn't know what it meant, would that potentially scare you?
Sure, yes.
So you also spoke about food deserts. We agree that's a problem. Do you think that having more food available for a longer period of time could help solve the food desert issue?
No.
Okay. If foods were cheaper, do you think it would be possible to build more grocery stores?
Yes.
Okay. And then onto your solvency, needing more and better labels. I like that you're taking this in the opposite direction, and we agree that people should deserve to know what's in their food. Would you be confused potentially by a label that was too long and worried? I mean, I'm making an argument, I guess, here, but if there were things that were unhealthy in your food, would you want to know about it?
Yes.
All right. Do you think
If there are,
bioengineered
wait,
foods are
if
unhealthy?
there are things that are unhealthy, that's what you said, right? If
Yeah.
there are things that, okay, yes, yeah.
All
And
right.
what was the
So,
question? Sorry.
yeah, no, the question was, since you do think that you would want to know about unhealthy things in your food, do you think that knowing about healthy things in your food potentially gets in the way of that?
I'm gonna say no.
All right, sounds good. And now our team will take some prep time to get ready for Rainer's speech.
Hello, debaters. Rainer Fagus, also BDL staff. Roger missed the timer, but I'm actually going to be keeping a timer myself, and I'm going to keep mine about 2 seconds short so that I can know what time I have as I'm going through, just so that I can do a better job just tracking and pacing how my speech is going. So let's start. So far, my partner just came on and kind of explained to you why right now the labels that we have actually is leading to this major harm, which is that millions of Americans can't afford to buy enough food. And specifically, Black and Latin households are more highly impacted. And then goes on to explain how by removing the labels, it would actually help to more people to buy GMO food, but also like encourage and incentivize farmers to grow them and essentially bringing the price of food down. The negative team came on and they wanted to tell you, well, we don't need the label situation is not really happening right now. We need more specific information, but we also need more information information overall. But they somehow want to make it less confusing. I'm not entirely sure how it's gonna go. Saying that they don't give them, they're confusing, they don't give them enough information. But they want you to believe that somehow, somewhere, they're gonna get more information in there, but somehow it's gonna be less confusing. If anything, we have a response for this, which is that BE food labels make people worry more about food that is perfectly safe, and that is from Salaton 15, and that is page 12. It says another thing that we've learned is that it makes no sense to avoid GMOs based on standards that nobody applies to non-GMO food. If you look at the illness or diet fatalities, you can make a better case against organic food than against GMOs. Cut the cord here at GMOs, just for time. So this is just a response to like the first piece about our extension. So we'd like to extend that, saying that the labels actually do matter and it's causing them to buy less of it. The second part, which is about the harm, they said like they agree with our harm, but we don't solve. So you can extend our harm because it says that they agree with our harm. But they want us to believe that it's about actually food deserts that's actually causing this, and it's not really that. Just remember this because I'm going to come back to it later. But we have a response to that as well, which is that societal inequality, not food deserts, are the reason why low-income households don't eat as much healthy food. That is from Florida 18. That's on page 14. It says, when it comes to food and nutrition, it's not just that higher income Americans have more money. They benefit even more from higher levels of education, which accounts for roughly 20% of the association between income and eating healthy. There are deeper reasons again tied to class that enable affluent educated households to put this nutritional information to use. So in this particular case, this is a direct rebuttal against the fact that food deserts is the main reason. Like, no, there are other reasons, societal inequality, but another way that we solve is like by bringing down the cost of food overall so that we can make it more accessible. So the last thing is about the solvency, saying that the solvency turn, but they can have it both ways. How can you say that's a solvency turn if you already said that our solvency doesn't solve the particular harm? But we do actually solve, and I know I'm out of time, but what I want to just finish my sentence is saying that when mandatory labeling happened in Vermont, sales of BE food decreased. When those labels were removed, sales of BE foods actually increased. So this is direct rebuttal against their solvency argument.
Judge, that was definitely
That's
over
my time.
time, and I request that is stricken from the record. Thank you.
I was a little early because I had 2 seconds shorter, so I don't know. That's why I always said it that way.
All right. So now would be the time that I ask questions to Rainer while Marisa is preparing for the Neg Block. That is the block where Marisa and I get to talk back to back, which means we're going to be very strategic about how we dole out our information. But in the meantime, we're going to start with cross-X. All right. So my first question is, you mentioned this card, or you mentioned this evidence about how societal reasons lead to bad eating. Could you clarify that card for me real quick, please?
Yeah, you were saying that our harm is real, but that's not the root cause is like food deserts, and we're saying that it's beyond that. It's actually societal inequality that is more tied to class, and fundamentally by that we're talking about the amount of funds that people have access to, and because of that, it's because of the cost of food. Yeah.
Thank you. So you did. So you mentioned class though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we mentioned how you mentioned in your first speech about how most Americans can't afford it because they're Black and Latino.
No, we're saying that these groups specifically are more impacted, but overall, everyone is impacted because at the end of the day, if food costs more, you're gonna buy less of it, but also you might choose unhealthy alternatives. Yeah.
Thank you. How does removing labels decrease the price of food?
I'm glad you asked. So my partner already outlined this, which is just like, if you remove it, more people will buy it, which will incentivize farmers to grow it. So if you increase the supply, you keep the demand the same, the price will drop.
Thank you. And that accounts for, inflation and everything that's going on in the world where people are barely able to afford stuff as it is, right?
Well, we can't control inflation, but now that you brought that up, inflation is already making food prices even more expensive. So we definitely need this. So thank you for bringing up the urgency of doing this now, because then that way, more than ever, we need to bring food prices down.
That's definitely not what I'm saying, but I like how you keep trying to insert your
I mean,
tabs in there.
That's what I heard.
So now we're going to take some prep time now before going into the Neg Block, because Marisa is going to speak, cross-X will happen, and then as soon as cross-X is done, I should be ready to speak.
All right, debate's over. We're gonna win.
All right.
Oh, wow, secret weapon.
So debaters,
Secret weapon.
if you ever need a secret weapon, bring a baby in.
Yeah, who will vote
Especially
against the
sweet
baby?
Michelle, and then
Hey.
you will win. 'Cause how can you not vote for
I know.
Michelle?
Yeah, smile.
Oh my
Happy.
I know,
right? Debaters, just for reference, Josh and I were talking through as Josh, both what I'm going to lay out, because this is the last chance that the negative can give new information. Everything after these constructives will be rebuttals, so we're going to need to extend existing evidence and really tell the story, give more reasoning and shape to our argument and responding to the others. So this speech carries some weight, so we're prepping for what we'll do and then what Josh will extend in the 1NR, as Josh mentioned, the negative block. Those two speeches of the negative sandwiched in the middle of the debate. So I will give my roadmap and then we can start the time. So my name is Marisa Sweskin. I am also a member of the BDL staff and the larger family that includes Michelle. And I am going to be basically extending the arguments my colleague Josh already made around no solvency, talking both about the ineffectual aspects of labeling as well as the failure of the Affirmative's plan to address the root cause of food inequity. So we can start the time. Judges, first I want to extend the card that Josh already read. Labels make people less concerned about BE foods. We need more and better labels, LAM 20. Specifically, clear and simple GMO labeling works to allay concerns and confusion. A 2018 study showed that Vermonters grew less opposed to GMOs, and popular sentiment towards these products actually improved. I'll cut the card there, when they use simpler labels. So not talking about an iPhone agreement that we brought up in the cross-X, very long. These are deliberately short and clear, and those have been shown to promote clarity and understanding. I'm going to continue with that, going on to page 24. which is Fleischman 22, legislation and awareness of bioengineered foods matters more than labels. Mandatory labeling law did not change consumer purchasing patterns. This is from Fleischman 22. Researchers found that increased consumer awareness caused by the legislation, coupled with existing non-GMO labeling, actually did shift preferences. Continuing down later in the card, indirect awareness. In this case, the labeling legislation being discussed in the media is really the primary mechanism by which we find consumer preferences are shifting. So basically what these cards are saying is that labels in and of themselves, simple, clear labels can be beneficial, but moreover, media discussion around bioengineered foods can have a lot more effect on how consumers are focusing on it versus this very narrow plan that the affirmative is saying will address food inequity, hunger, and environmental concerns simply by removing labels. Judge, it is far too narrow a plan for the harms that they lay out. Well, going on to speaking of the root cause, our opponents said that social inequity is at the root cause of food inequity and lack of healthy food. We couldn't agree more. If we go to page 30, that is the root cause of hunger in the US is policy choices, not lack of food supplies. That's Pathak, Richards, and Jasulik 22. America's hunger crisis is not due to lack of food production or scarcity in food supplies. And it goes on, I'm going to cut the card there for time, but this is the heart of the matter. It goes on to say that all of these economic and systemic inequalities are at the root of the food insecurity and the lack of food justice. And simply, as the affirmative plan is telling us to do, simply removing labels on bioengineered foods does not solve that problem. And to our view, it is not the highest impact place to look at when you want to address the root cause of food inequity. It is misguided, narrow, and it is largely besides the point. Our final point that we want to make, labels make people less concerned about BE foods. We need more. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm out of time and I didn't get to read my last card, which sometimes happens.
Fair.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the last cross-examination in the debate. Again, because I'm giving the next speech for my team, Rainer will ask questions of Marisa, who just gave her speech.
Yes, so for my first question, you wanted to extend the LEM card saying that labels, we just need clearer and more simple labels. How do you get clearer and more simple labels if you want to also stuff more information in there?
So we've never said we want to stuff more information. And by the way, we've never proposed a counter plan. We're simply saying that the focus on labels is so narrow and ineffectual to address the breadth of the problems that you laid out. But specifically, we do have examples, for example, what is referenced in this card that explains that when you have simple labels, for example, stickers that just identify what something is, and also in the other card, besides LAM 20, also Fleischman 22 talks about media awareness and consumer awareness, that those things can actually promote the usage. And what your plan said is not only removing labels, but you want to promote the use of bioengineered foods. And so we're suggesting that it is not effectual to just remove labels and that will automatically promote the use of that.
Okay, thank you for answering that. The second thing you mentioned was that legislation and awareness matters more. And looking at that card, it just says I changed their pattern. How exactly did it change their pattern? And yeah, if you could just expand on that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say exactly how it changed their pattern. It just says it just changed their pattern.
Mm-hmm. Nor did you in your affirmative say exactly why labels cause fear. It just causes fear, right? I mean, this does not go into full detail of the mechanics, but in the Fleischman 22 card, it does give examples.
If I can just interrupt really quickly, but we at least said what was happening, which is causing fear. But to change the pattern, we don't know if it like caused increase more, if it less. But I'm running out of time, so I do have a last question. Yeah, I do have a last question. Your partner mentioned that it was food desert, but in this speech, you're saying that the root cause is U.S. policy. So which one is it? Can you guys like pick a side? Like, what's the fundamental issue?
So the root cause, we agree with you. The root cause is a deeply layered system of societal inequity, both economic, racial, and so forth, that can cause this. Food deserts, what my partner was bringing up, was just one example of the ways that this inequity plays out and that bioengineered foods wouldn't solve for that. It's not the only example of that, but what my partner was pointing out with the food desert cards is that even if there's an abundance of bioengineered foods, that alone is not going to address the inequity caused by a lack of access to purchasing those foods in some places.
Oh, I see. So this is a new argument. Okay.
It is not a new argument.
I'm going to focus mainly on the harms because I feel like my partner did a lot of work on the solvency aspect of the affirmative plan. So I'm just going to focus on the harm. And one of the biggest aspects is, how does the affirmative say that they are going to claim to solve for US hunger? Like, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt for a second that they feel like they can solve US hunger with just removing labels from food. And that's what their plan says, that they're going to remove labels from GMO foods and to increase awareness of GMOs amongst folks so that, people would buy and consume more GMOs. Does that solve for the amount of people who can't afford food in the first place? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how removing labels gives us more money to be able to spend. I'm also not sure how I'm not sure how the reduction of labels and awareness of GMOs and how healthy they could be. I'm not sure how that solves for food deserts, places where there just isn't food at all. The affirmative seems to make the claim that if food is cheaper, which they haven't explained how food is going to get cheaper, that people will be able to buy food and access food in places where they normally wouldn't, even though we don't see that and haven't seen that, to my knowledge, almost ever. So that's a big hurdle that I feel like the affirmative really has to claim in order to even come close to addressing the solvency. They have to address this harm first of US hunger, and removing labels doesn't cure that. Removing labels doesn't change people's race, ethnicity, stuff like that. So the places where we live or the places where we occupy ourselves aren't in places that are primed for us to have more food and are primed for places for food to grow and primed for even more food to go out. And the last thing I'll say is I don't know how long it's going to take for them if they remove labels, if they increase awareness, to not only flip, United States population's view of the negative connotation that labels have. I also don't know or understand how they intend to use labels and increasing food to, do anything like make more grocery stores or places like that. Okay. So in conclusion, they currently have a really big harm that we agree is a harm, but the way that they're trying to solve the harm is nowhere near as efficient as what is really needed to solve the harm. Vote neg.
Again, my name is Roger. I'm Boston Debate League staff, and I'm on the affirmative side. So as a quick roadmap, I'll be extending my partner's arguments and answering my opponent's arguments, specifically on the impact of labels, societal inequity, and the worry that labels cause. So my first point on this topic is an extension of my partner's argument from Bone 22, which showed directly that when GMO labels were removed from bioengineered foods in Vermont, the amount of bioengineered food that was purchased went up. The negative team read a card, Fleischman 22, which is page 24, that argued that a lot of the reasoning behind this was related to media attention or non-GMO labels, like legislation. They gave different reasons, but if you look at the text of that card, it says specifically that only a percentage of the overall change in people's opinions was due to things like laws and media attention. We would argue that a different percentage was due to the fact that people weren't scared of the foods anymore. And the price actually goes down when you look at a bioengineered food versus an organic food. So we believe strongly that people are afraid of labels. This is my partner's argument in Salatin 15, that labels make people worry. And also my argument from the 1AC, that labels make people worry. So we believe that you, sure, cannot entirely say that labels are the only reason why people don't buy bioengineered foods. However, they're a significant reason, and we have definitive proof from Vermont that when they're removed, the amount of bioengineered food that is purchased increases. That's a big deal, because our whole argument rests on the fact that we want people buying more bioengineered food. There's also been this debate about whether or not societal inequity or food deserts are to blame. And our general argument here is we can't solve those huge societal problems. We can't eliminate capitalism with the magic wand. What we can do very easily is remove a law that was implemented just this year, which removes labels from foods. We cannot solve societal inequity, but we can make people more likely to buy bioengineered foods. They're cheaper, they last longer, they're healthier. And that's addressing the inequities in society. It won't solve the entire problem, but it's an important start, because we have people right now who cannot afford enough food. Finally, to the point of food deserts, there's plenty of food in many places. The major reason why people cannot access it is cost. And bioengineered foods reduce the cost for people, especially in this time of inflation.
Hello again, I am Marisa. I will be doing the 2NR, closing up the negative speech, trying to bring it home for the negative. And as Josh reminded, just for debaters, for a reminder that the role of the negative is to prove that the affirmative plan will not make the world a better place. Either that their harms are not valid. In this case, we agree with their harms, or that their plan won't solve in the way that they're saying, and that's what we've chosen to approach. So my roadmap, I will be basically extending some arguments from our constructive speeches that my partner and I made, and answering some of the arguments that the affirmative made, including in that rebuttal. And as a reminder, we're not bringing in these rebuttals any new evidence. So anything that Roger quoted, anything I'm quoting and moving forward is things that we've already brought into the debate. All right, we will start. So judges, once again, what we want to make clear is, as my colleague Josh already shared, is that the affirmative laid out some big harms around world hunger, access to food, injustice as it relates to food, nutrition, even some environmental concerns. And then they had a plan about removing labels. Our argument here is that this plan is narrow, ineffectual, and not up to the task to addressing even in any substantial and meaningful way, because substantial is in the resolution. It is not substantial enough to make a meaningful dent in the harms that the affirmative laid out. Specifically, if I can extend again the card we read on page 30, the root cause of hunger in the US is policy choices, not lack of food supply. And this goes on to talk about, again, the number of socioeconomic and racial inequities that lead to a lack of food access. The bioengineered foods alone, even if removing labels were to increase the consumption of those, that alone wouldn't address things. In the 1AR, our opponent, Roger, referenced our food desert card, and he said that the main reason people can't access food is cost. I would say that perhaps our opponent is not aware of the definition of food deserts. If we extend the card that my colleague Josh read, food deserts are a big reason why low-income families lack access to healthy foods, Curly 18. Food deserts are communities, usually in low-income areas, lacking grocery stores, lacking farmers markets and healthy food providers. So even if bioengineered food is less expensive and people could buy it, they do not have in food deserts the actual stores and locations to purchase this food. And that is the issue that, again, is just an example, not the only example, but one example of how focusing narrowly on removing labels on bioengineered foods fails to address the heart of the matter in any substantial way. We're not expecting the affirmative to solve world hunger or even US hunger, but we are expecting them to make a substantial change. This plan fails to do it. Finally, we want to extend that labels in and of themselves, it's at best a mixed bag of to what extent that would even have the effect of increasing, as they say, promoting the usage of bioengineered foods, decreasing fear. We have both red cards that reference Vermont. Vermont may not be the most representative state, by the way, in the in this union here. Referencing Vermont, both the affirmative team read a card referencing how labels cause more fear. We read a card referencing how actually simple, clear labels increased receptiveness and purchasing of those foods. So at best, this question about labels is an indecisive solvency. But our big point, judges, is that it is too narrow and too lacking in substantial impact, the affirmatives plan.
Vote neg.
Vote neg.
This is the last rebuttal of the round. So here's what it comes down to. So because they agree with our harms, we're only gonna we're not really gonna focus on establishing the harms, and because they agree with our inherency, we're also gonna just drop that and just really focus on solvency. But to start with that, I want to focus this piece on the fact that they dropped the solvency turn argument that they made. They never brought it back up in terms of like actually labels would be good. So I just want to strike that out of the record. But now I want to spend some time on the last two speeches they made about the fact that there's another root problem, which is the fact that it's legislation and not labels that's causing this. And the first root cause was the fact that it is food desert. So let's just start with that. Number one, we solved both of these root causes, even if that was the bar. Why? Because the food deserts, which means essentially having affordable and fresh food available. If you, like my partner explained, if you increase the production of food, because farmers will be more incentivized to grow it, because now GMOs are not being promoted in a negative way, you're gonna increase the supply, which is gonna bring down the price of food, which means they're gonna be more readily available. That's one of the things. And number two, the policy choices argument. Yeah, that is a policy choice right now that's keeping that from happening. So we do agree, it is a policy choice that's causing this. The policy choice to force these labels on the food, which essentially is making food more expensive because, again, people don't want to buy them. So even though that they want to put the bar there, we actually do meet and solve both of those. But let's just kind of give a recap of the round. So right now, we're saying right now with the labels, whether or not you put non-GMO or GMO is causing people to think twice about it. It's kind of like going on a flight and being reminded, not all planes crash. They're not even telling you exactly what the number is, but just hearing that thought is just like, hold on a second. Like, I wasn't even thinking about this. It's the exact same way. That's why we're advocating getting rid of labels. And now they're saying like, well, the problem actually does exist, that, there's a food crisis, but the fact is it may not be that. This is real life. We're not talking absolutes. This is not a fictional world. Yes, we don't solve for all of it. I know it's shocking. But as my partner explained, we make significant headways towards improving this problem. And they had the nerves to talk about substantial. They didn't even define what substantial is, but we'll define for you what substantial is for us. Substantial for us means even if 100,000 more people were able to have access to better food, cheaper food, that would be substantial for us. But we think under our calculations, it'll be millions of people who will be improved, whose lives will be improved. That is substantial. If they don't think it's gonna be, I don't know, like 50 million, and that's their bar, yes, we don't meet that. But if we're talking about like 10 million or so, we think substantial means like improving even one life will be substantial, but we go way beyond that. And that's why you should vote for AFF, because we make the world a better place. Thank you.
Well, debaters, if you're watching this in a practice or watching it on your own, discuss with each other, think to yourself, who do you think won? Who gave the strongest arguments on each side? What compelled you more? What arguments on each side do you want to kind of use and focus on when you're arguing on the affirmative or you're arguing on the negative? What do you think are the weakest arguments that you would want to de-emphasize or not use those cards, or maybe frame them in a different way than how we frame them or how Roger and Rainer framed them? So take a moment to discuss. If you're the judge, who would win? What would be your reason for decision? Did the affirmative show that their plan would make the world a better place or not?
Tell us if
Yeah.
you see us too. That'd be great. If
Yes.
you see it, and you've seen this video and you watched the debate round and you made it here and you see us out in the wild,
Out in the
let us
wild.
know what happened. So that
He
we-
thought we lost.
yeah,
I
I can take an L, but I doubt we lost. So.
Yeah.
You should let them know that they lost. But a thing that is worth mentioning, as you watching this, you'll notice we had to make a lot of choices. Just because 3 minutes, especially if you're a novice, middle school, you don't have a lot of time. If you're in high school, you have more time. But still, the factor of choice will always be there in terms of like choosing what do I emphasize, what do I actually choose to read. That's going to happen. That's why, again, in practice, it's essential. But also just like doing some of the pre-work, like Josh was showing, like kind of pre-flowing the round. That's actually a great way to do it, especially if you are in a closed division. You know what they're gonna read, so you kind of make the round easier for yourself. So that way you're not trying to do everything in the round as the round is going on. So that's another thing I'd just like to emphasize as a way, just like work you can do before the round starts and work you can do during practice to have a better tournament experience.
And if we were on the debate team and continuing to debate through the season with this case, I think like Josh and I as partners would go back and debrief and say, oh gosh, what could we have brought in?
Yep.
What choices would we make differently? Because there's a lot of arguments in the negative that we didn't choose to read for time that maybe we could have brought in and dropped something else. So definitely good to have ongoing conversations with your partners in between rounds at tournaments and at practices.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you for watching. And we'll see you at the tournament.
Thank you for watching. Take care.
Watching.
Bye.